You're listening to Sound Aside. I'm Libby Denkman. Washington, like the entire country, has been hit hard by fentanyl. In 2025, King County recorded 707 overdose deaths involving the synthetic opioid, which can be 50 times stronger than heroin. 707 is a devastating number, but it's actually down from a peak in 2023 when more than 1,000 people died from fentanyl-related overdoses in the county. The drop mirrors a downward trend that we've seen across the country, but the crisis is still overwhelming many communities. A biotech company called ARMR Sciences is hoping to solve at least one piece of this very complicated puzzle. Instead of reversing these overdoses, they want to stop them from happening in the first place through a fentanyl vaccine. The team at ARMR told us today that the vaccine is set to begin its first human trials in the Netherlands in the first quarter of this year. In December, I spoke with Dr. Colin Hale, a research associate professor at the University of Houston. He's one of the co-founders of ARMR Sciences, and he filled me in about the vaccine and how it could change the opioid crisis. So first off, before we get to how it works and what you expect could be the benefits here, I want to understand a little bit, why did you decide to turn your efforts to a fentanyl vaccine? What's the backstory there?
Yeah, the backstory is that our group has been working to develop vaccine technology against substances associated with use disorders. The first one was a cocaine vaccine that was brought to human clinical trials about 15 years ago or so that failed in phase 2 clinical trials. And then we developed a methamphetamine vaccine, and we're funded by NIDA, National Institutes on Drug Abuse, to develop that one. However, we did not meet the milestones that they wanted us to meet. And at that time, it was clear that fentanyl was becoming a huge problem. And this was back in 2016. And so then we shifted our focus to developing an anti-fentanyl vaccine at that time using updated technology. And and I've been working on this vaccine since here at the University of Houston.
Can you walk us through how it works? How does it prevent overdoses?
Sure. So your prototypical vaccine will include maybe a piece of a virus or a piece of bacteria in which we want to induce the body to make antibodies against to protect you against that particular bug. What we've done is we've made a vaccine where we induce the immune system to produce antibodies against a chemical, and that chemical is fentanyl. So we have pieces of the vaccine that is part of our formulation. We have a carrier protein linked to a hapten, which is a fentanyl-like molecule, and then we add an adjuvant that increases the immunogenicity or the ability of the vaccine to increase antibodies against fentanyl. So the vaccination schedule is typical of, for example, the hepatitis B vaccine, where you get initial vaccination, and then a few months you get a booster, and then a few months after that you get the final booster. The way that it works is that an individual that is vaccinated, when they consume fentanyl, those antibodies bind to fentanyl and prevent it from getting into the brain. And that prevents any effects of fentanyl, the euphoric effects as well as the deadly effects. That fentanyl that's been captured by those antibodies is eventually eliminated from the body with no effects.
Wow. So the antibodies lock onto the fentanyl and it can't get to the brain, and all those associated issues are not a problem if this works as intended. What kind of testing has been done so far?
We've done a lot of preclinical testing. Preclinical testing entails animals, and we published these studies using mice and rats in extensive behavioral paradigms, analgesic tests, and we've also completed the toxicology testing required by the FDA. And the unique The unique parts of the vaccine are really not unique. In fact, the carrier protein we're using is already in vaccines on the market and has been in numerous vaccines. And the adjuvant we're using has been in 15 human clinical trials, including infants, and the side effect profile is excellent. So we anticipate the vaccine, which, as you mentioned, is going to be tested in humans in January of next year. We anticipate positive results.
So let's talk about some of the logistics here. When somebody gets the vaccine, how long does it take to actually kick in and protect them from an overdose, theoretically?
Uh, we we have we look at antibodies after the initial vaccination, and they have appreciable levels of antibodies at 3 to 4 weeks after one single injection. Now, we haven't tested whether they would be fully protected or not from fentanyl, but we certainly anticipate that they would have some protection after about 4 weeks.
And you'd have to take a booster. You said every 3 months or so. How often would
Yeah,
they have to be re-administered?
yeah. Your typical like hepatitis B vaccination schedule would probably work. In animals, we administer the vaccine at 0 initial vaccination and then at 3 and then again at 6 weeks. That's what we do in animals. And as I mentioned, the results are quite incredible. When I first started testing the vaccine in animals, I couldn't believe it, the protection. So I started taking video of the experiments because I knew my colleagues would not believe the results. That's how effective the vaccine is.
And is this a shot, doctor?
For now, it is an intramuscular injection like your typical vaccination. We do have formulations, and we've published these data already in mice where we administer the vaccine sublingually or underneath the tongue and also intranasally as well. And it's interesting in that the intranasal route of administration of our vaccination had the greatest amount of protection, which is very interesting.
You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Dankman. I'm talking with Dr. Colin Hale. He's a research associate professor at the University of Houston, and he's one of the co-founders of ARMR Sciences, which is a biotech company that's soon going to bring its fentanyl vaccine to human trials in the Netherlands. Doctor, who is this vaccine intended for? Because it is potentially really promising to protect somebody from overdose. But if it also protects against the euphoric effects of fentanyl, somebody who's looking to get high is probably not your target audience, or is it? I mean, who is this intended for?
This is an important question. This vaccine is for individuals that actually want to quit. Your typical patient goes into detox off of fentanyl, and then generally they're put on a maintenance therapy, a maintenance drug such as methadone, buprenorphine, or naltrexone. And then they are released eventually out of the facility. And then, unfortunately, 80 to 90% of these individuals relapse. They stop taking their medication and then they go drug seeking. They obtain the drug and then they typically take as much drug as they did before they underwent detoxification, and then they unfortunately overdose and die.
Yeah, it's a very dangerous phase. Yeah,
Yes,
definitely.
exactly. And so what we vision the first application of the vaccine would be, in addition to these individuals in treatment getting on medication, they are also will receive the vaccination. So they will be vaccinated before they're released. And so they are developing anti-fentanyl antibodies in their system. So even if they quit their maintenance therapy, the antibodies will be there. So when they relapse, they will be protected. And as you mentioned, from the euphoric effects and also from fentanyl's deadly effects.
So it's like a backstop for recovery.
Yes, definitely. And I typically say that after relapse, this is a way that they can get back on the wagon to recovery. This is their chance.
What about other drug users? I mean, we know that fentanyl gets cut into different substances, cocaine, et cetera. It can be a surprise. Um, I doubt that you set out to create a vaccine that makes it safer for recreational drug use of all kinds. But is that also a potential side effect here for somebody who, is at risk of being surprised by the presence of fentanyl in the course of their drug use?
Yeah, I wrestled with that application because you're enabling individuals to use illicit drugs. But at the end of the day, we're in the business of saving lives. That's what it comes down to. So, and you're talking about using the vaccine as a prophylactic treatment. And I've been contacted by numerous law enforcement individuals, first responders that come into contact with substances they just don't know what it is, and they want to be protected. I've also been contacted by parents that are absolutely terrified of their kids being poisoned by fentanyl. The DEA recently did a study and looked at counterfeit pills, ADHD medications, pain medications, anti-anxiety medications, and found that 7 out of 10 had lethal levels of fentanyl in them. So the idea would be, again, using the vaccine as a protective effect, and that's behind the name of ARMR Sciences. The vaccine will be used to protect individuals, whether it's our military, our first responders, or individuals that just want to be protected themselves.
So the drug is about to begin human trials in the Netherlands. What happens during these trials? What are you watching for? What are some of the stages that you go through? What are the benchmarks that you are hoping to see?
Yeah, so there are 3 phases in human clinical trials in the United States. And the first phase, it's called the phase 1. It's a small study. Ours is about 40 participants that will receive the vaccine. And the endpoint, what we're looking at, the purpose of the phase 1 is safety. We will also collect other data, of course. We'll take blood samples and look at the anti-fentanyl antibody levels in these participants. But the primary aim of a phase 1 is safety.
Thinking about the long-term potential effects of this drug, I have been exposed to fentanyl, I think the only time in my life when I've undergone surgery. Is there a potential problem with inhibiting pain management, for example, for a patient if they happen to be on this vaccine for fentanyl overdose? Do you foresee any obstacles, for example, if a patient is hospitalized, things like that?
I've gotten this question a lot, and I've gotten pushback on this. Some physicians actually saying this is a terrible idea because fentanyl is a very good drug. It is used a lot in medicine for anesthesia and also for pain management. I'm sure you've heard of the fentanyl patches, for example. And it's a very good drug when it's used appropriately. It is a deadly drug when it's not used appropriately. And we showed in one of our publications that we get a cross reactivity to fentanyl and fentanyl-like drugs. The antibodies that are produced from our vaccine recognize these types of compounds in the class of compounds. We also showed that the antibodies do not bind to drugs like morphine, oxycodone, methadone, and also if the drug used for pain management or anesthesia is not in the class of fentanyl compounds, it will not be affected. So there are alternatives to fentanyl in medicine.
I'm talking with Dr. Colin Hale, Research Associate Professor at the University of Houston, also one of the co-founders of ARMR Sciences, which is developing a vaccine for fentanyl overdose. Just quickly here before we go, Doctor, what are the next steps to greenlight? Say the trials in the Netherlands are successful. How soon could this potentially be available to patients?
Yeah, that's probably the most important question. How long is it going to take us? We, in this country, what we have now, the medications that we have, the rescue therapies we have are certainly helping. There's no doubt about that. But things are not optimal. We need a different treatment strategy. We need something that is proactive, something that's on board before an individual is even exposed. The issue with naloxone and nalmefene, which is another one that was just put on the market as a rescue therapy, is that an individual that is overdosed cannot dose themselves. They are unconscious, so they have to have someone there beside them to administer the drug. Now, with our vaccine, the antibodies are on board, and you are protected. And so this is the type of reasoning that we're thinking will help us facilitate the approval of this vaccine, as well as I mentioned, part of our vaccine is already in vaccines on the market. And as also mentioned, the adjuvant has been in numerous human clinical trials with very good results. So we vision that the phase 1 will go quickly and the results will be very positive. And then we'll immediately work to start phase 2 clinical trials. I'm not sure where those will be conducted, most likely here in the States. And we will petition the FDA to fast track this because of the impact fentanyl and derivatives of having on the population still. So a few years is all I can say. I can't say an exact time.
Dr. Colin Hale with the University of Houston and ARMR Sciences. It must be very exciting to be going to these human trials, but also a nervous time for your team. What's the kind of thing you keep in mind as you're watching this process and trying to push this over the line? I mean, your ultimate goal is to save lives, right?
Correct. And you're right. There is anxiety. But the anticipation of this going into humans for the first time in history. This is the first time a anti-fentanyl vaccine has ever been tested in humans. So it's also very exciting. And 99% of potential products that are developed from the bench and go to the bedside fail. Because of how our vaccine is formulation is built, we anticipate that we will have a positive result, and we will get this to individuals that need it as quick as possible.
Thank you, Dr. Hale.
Thank you for having me.
You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Dankman. And just a note, as Dr. Hale was talking, my producer, Maliha, flagged a statistic that he cited, and that was that 7 out of 10 counterfeit pills had lethal levels of fentanyl. Maliha checked, and according to more recent agency data from November 2024, that's DEA data, it was 5 out of 10 pills. That is still a troubling number, not quite as high as that 7 out of 10 that Dr. Hale cited. And once again, that conversation with Dr. Hale first aired in December. Today, we heard the first trial of the vaccine is expected to go forward this year. You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Dankman. On the subject of addiction, I wanted to take a moment to share a recent listener message that we received here at Soundside. Last week, we brought you an update on Kratom regulation in Washington. In case you missed it, Kratom is derived from a plant from Southeast Asia that can have psychoactive effects. It is not an opioid, but it can have similar effects at high doses. You've probably seen signs marketing Kratom on just about every smoke shop and convenience store around the city of Seattle. We previously spoke with UW medicine researcher Caleb Banta Green about what's known scientifically about Kratom and whether it has potential to treat opioid use disorder. Kratom has not been approved by the FDA. It is sold as a supplement in Washington state. The cities of Spokane and Spokane Valley recently banned the sale of Kratom, citing a goal of protecting young people and children. 3 separate bills that would have taxed or limited access to Kratom across Washington failed to advance in the state legislature this year. We asked you to give us your thoughts on Kratom and whether it should be more tightly regulated. Eric from Bothell responded, and he shared a really personal story about his experience with Kratom and its effects, and we wanted to share that with you.
I've never been addicted to a drug ever in my life, and this Kratom's really got me. That's the only thing I've ever really been addicted to. And it's like an opiate. It gives you the same feeling as if you took a painkiller, but it's like more cerebral, more in your head than just a body high. And I don't think powdered Kratom should be outlawed, but 7-OH, which is a derivative of Kratom, it's like a synthetic chemical that's in it that they, like an extract, a concentrate, that stuff should be outlawed. That is like the most insane drug I've ever done in my life. That stuff is super dangerous. I've never been addicted to anything before, and that stuff, I've taken it for like 2 weeks and I already get withdrawals from it. And that's like, and you buy it at the gas station. It's like the craziest, best high of any drug I've ever done.
Thanks to Eric for sharing that experience. 7-OH is one of the derivatives of Kratom that has been targeted for regulation in other parts of the country. So far, as I mentioned, those bills did not go forward in the legislature this year. I really appreciate all of you who call in with your experiences about the news stories that we are covering. If you ever want to reach out to us or share a tip about something that you're experiencing in your own life, you can email us at soundside@kuow.org or leave us a voicemail at 206-221-3213. That's 206-221-3213. Thanks for listening to Soundside. Don't forget you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 Seattle at noon and 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, or anytime right here online at KUOW.org, or of course on your favorite podcast app.